She texted the Mafia boss by mistake and woke up with his name on her baby's bracelet. The rain in Port Wexler doesn't fall, it attacks. It comes in off the harbor sideways, a cold, driving sheet of needles that announces the first breath of winter. The water hits the plate glass windows of the Baylight Birth Center with a sound like fistfuls of gravel. Inside, I was deaf to it. My world had shrunk to the rhythmic beep of a monitor I couldn't afford and the damp, slick weight of a new life on my chest. Mara Ellison, freelance courtroom artist. That's what my tax forms said. Anyway, for the last 2 years, it meant sitting in oak-paneled rooms, capturing the bored expressions of jurors and the sharp profiles of men who measured their lives in shipping containers and broken contracts. It was a living. It was not health insurance. The labor had been a marathon of grinding stress. 30 hours, the nurses had whispered, 30 hours fueled by nothing but lukewarm water and a terror so profound it had become a background hum. The contractions had ripped through me, each one a fresh reminder of my complete and total isolation. No family, no partner, just me and the screaming, raw-edged panic of impending motherhood. My phone, an old model with a spiderweb crack across the screen, suddenly lit up the dim recovery cot. It vibrated against the thin mattress, a harsh buzz against the quiet, a number I didn't recognize. The message was short, cryptic. Glasshouse Station is closing. Use Pier 3. My blood didn't just run cold. It froze solid in my veins. I knew that number. I stared at it until the digits blurred, but I didn't need to see them. I knew the shape of it, the memory of it. It was him. My hand, shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline, went to the screen, my gallery. I scrolled back, past sketches of witnesses and defendants, back 3 months. There it was, the same number, sitting above a single, desperate message I had sent into the void. The panic that night had been different. It was the sharp, metallic taste of being hunted. I had left the courthouse late, my portfolio under my arm. 2 men, shadows in the perpetual drizzle of the Glasshouse district, had fallen in step behind me. Not muggers. Their shoes were too expensive. Their pace was too patient. I had ducked into an alley, my heart hammering against my ribs, and typed out a text to the only person I could think of. Colin, my ex. Colin Bray, the charming, ambitious paralegal who had sworn we were just on a break, but hadn't returned a call in 6 weeks. Colin, help me. They're following. My thumb had slipped on the wet screen. I hit send. The reply came a minute later. Not from Colin, from the strange number. Who is this? Not a question, a demand. Then, before I could process the mistake, the unknown number was calling me. I had pressed myself against the wet brick, terrified, and answered. A voice. Low, calm, insulated from the storm I was standing in. It was like granite. Where are you? I think I have the wrong number, I'd whispered, my breath fogging in front of me. You sent a message for help, the voice stated. Where are you? Glasshouse, near the old cannery. A pause, the sound of him breathing, slow and measured. Stay in the alley, do not move, a black sedan. License plate ends in 90. It will be there in 2 minutes. Get in. Do not talk to the driver. He hung up. The sedan appeared exactly 1 minute and 40 seconds later. I got in. The doors locked with a heavy, expensive thud. The driver, a mountain of muscle in a dark suit, never looked at me. He drove me to my apartment building and watched until I was inside. I never heard from the number again until tonight. Now, in the recovery room, the full weight of my situation crashed down. No insurance. A baby. So small, so perfect, her little mouth rooting against my gown, and a bill that would probably equal a down payment on a house I could never own. Tens of thousands of dollars. I was starting this child's life in a hole I would never crawl out of. I closed my eyes, pulling the baby closer. Skin to skin. That's what the midwife said, to regulate her breathing. My breathing, I named her. Just in my head. Juniper, June. A soft knock. A young midwife. Her face kind, pushed the door open. Mara, someone sent a gift for the baby. She carried a simple cloth-lined box, not a gift basket, No balloons, no cellophane, just a sturdy, tasteful box. A gift, I said, my voice cracking. From who I don't. An acquaintance, the note said. She placed it on the rolling table. Inside, nestled on gray linen, were practical things, a wool blanket, onesies, and a small velvet pouch. I opened it. It was a newborn identification bracelet, not the plastic hospital kind, but a delicate, heavy thing made of brushed silver, a keepsake. Engraved on the tiny plate in a clean, sharp font was one word. Viero. I stopped breathing. The name meant nothing to me. It was alien. It was wrong. This wasn't my gift. My phone buzzed again. Same number. All accounts settled. Rest. The signature was just 2 initials. C.E. Cassian Viero. The name hit me. It wasn't from the phone call. It was from the courtroom. Cassian Viero, the head of the Viero shipping concern, the man the papers called the Harbor King, the man I had sketched just 4 months ago, sitting in the defendant's chair, charged with racketeering. The charges had been dismissed, lack of evidence. He had walked out of the courtroom with the same cold, calm expression I had heard in his voice over the phone. I had texted a mafia boss by mistake, and he had just paid my hospital bill. The midwife was tidying the room, her movements efficient. She leaned in, lowering her voice. Listen, Mara, I shouldn't be saying this, but you should probably get your things together. We're discharging everyone we can. Why I just gave birth. We're being shut down. Tonight, an emergency inspection from the BHI. The Bureau of Harbor Integrity, the one government agency in Port Wexler that everyone, from the dock workers to the men in $1,000 suits, seemed to fear. They're closing a birth center in the middle of the night. They're calling it a structural audit, she said, her eyes telling me she didn't believe a word of it, but it's a full sweep. They'll be here within the hour. You don't want to be here when they arrive, especially with no insurance paperwork filed. They'll lock your file in processing for months. The quiet threat hung in the air. Get out, now! She helped me into my clothes, my body an aching, unfamiliar thing. I dressed June in one of the new onesies from the box. It felt impossibly soft. As I packed my meager bag, I noticed the midwife removing the standard plastic hospital band from June's ankle. I'll just get her official discharge bracelet on, she said, multitasking. She pulled a new, standard-issue plastic band from a printer. She snapped it onto June's tiny, perfect ankle. I picked June up, my arms trembling. I was about to leave, to step out into the rain with a newborn and nowhere to go, when I glanced at the new bracelet, the one the midwife had just printed. The white plastic was stamped with the hospital logo, the time of birth, and a last name. Viero. My heart stopped. This is wrong, I whispered. This isn't her name. Her name is Ellison, Mara Ellison. The midwife frowned, tapping at the computer screen. That's odd. It's what's in the system. The file was updated about an hour ago. From administration, it's all locked in. See Viero. Someone hadn't just paid my bill. They had changed my daughter's identity in the hospital system. I clutched June to my chest and walked out of the room, my mind reeling. The text message, the glass house, Pier 3. It wasn't a random message. It was a directive. He knew the BHI was coming. He was moving me. The main entrance was chaotic. Nurses and security arguing. I followed the midwife's earlier advice and headed for the side exit, the one that led to the staff parking lot. The rain was heavier now, the wind howling. I shielded June with my body, stepping out into the night. A black sedan was idling by the curb, its engine a low, powerful rumble. It was the only car there. It sat in the darkness, windows tinted, absorbing the light from the street lamp. I froze. The back window lowered, smooth and silent. He was inside. I couldn't see his face clearly, just the sharp cut of a dark suit and the pale white of his hands. And his eyes, they found me through the deluge, gray like the harbor in winter. They were cold, absolutely steady, and assessing. It was the first time I had ever seen him in person, this phantom on the phone, this name in the newspaper. Cassian Viero stared at me and at the baby in my arms. And in those cold, calculating eyes, I saw the one thing I hadn't felt in almost a full day. A strange, terrifying, and profound sense of safety. The rain lashed against the sedan as I stood frozen on the wet pavement, the baby a warm, solid weight against my chest. Cassian Viero did not get out of the car. He simply watched me, his gray eyes unblinking, waiting. The cold was already seeping through my thin hospital gown. "What did you do?" My voice was a raw whisper, barely audible over the wind, the bracelet, the name. The driver's door opened, but it was Cassian who emerged from the back, unfolding himself into the storm. He was taller than I'd sketched him, his suit impossibly crisp despite the downpour. He held no umbrella. The rain darkened his black hair, plastering it to his skull, but he seemed unaware of it. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to be heard, far enough to respect the animal terror I was radiating. "I paid your bill," he said, his voice the same granite calm I remembered from the phone. "You put your name on my daughter." "It was a debt," he replied, as if this were a simple transaction. "A debt for what?" "That phone call you drove me home." "You texted the wrong number." "Miss Ellison," he said, 3 months ago, you were in the Glasshouse district, being followed by 2 men from the Blackfin Syndicate." I flinched. He knew their name. "Your text was an error, but it was a timely one. It scrambled one of their operations, a trap they were setting for my people near the cannery. Your message, asking for help from that location, made them believe they were exposed. They pulled back. You saved 3 of my men, unintentionally." He paused, his eyes dropping to the bundle in my arms. The Viero concern recognizes its debts. "So you bought my baby," I spat, clutching June tighter. "I am moving you to safety." He ignored the insult. "The BHI inspection is a screen. Blackfin is using the lockdown to sweep the district. They are looking for you." "Me? Why me?" "Because you saw them that night, and because of the man you were trying to text." His gaze moved from her face to the rain-slicked street, and for a moment, his thoughts were his own. He knew exactly who Colin Bray was. Bray, the ambitious paralegal, was a legal runner at the Rivermount Civil Court, a glorified gossip who sold case files, jury manifests, and witness schedules to the highest bidder. For the last 6 months, Bray had been feeding information exclusively to the Blackfin Syndicate. When Mara Ellison, the courtroom artist who saw everything, texted Colin Bray for help while being followed by Blackfin operatives, they assumed the worst. They assumed she knew what Colin was. They assumed she was a loose end. Her accidental text to Cassian had been a fortunate coincidence. It put her on his radar just as Blackfin was moving on a high-stakes shipment. His people had intercepted the data, and when her panicked text correlated with Blackfin pulling their men from the trap, Cassian's analysts drew a simple conclusion. Blackfin thought Mara Ellison was Viero's informant. It was a mistake that had saved his shipment. A debt was recorded. Now, Blackfin wanted to clean the slate. They were using the BHI lockdown, a lockdown they had likely triggered with an anonymous tip about code violations, to find the woman who had cost them millions. He turned back to me, his expression flat. "Bray works for them. He sold them your location from the hospital intake. We have to leave. Now." The back door of the sedan opened. I looked at the dark, warm interior, then at the hospital doors, where I could already see the blue uniforms of BHI agents massing in the lobby. I was trapped. I got in the car. The inside was silent, insulated from the storm. It smelled of clean leather and something metallic. Cassian slid in opposite me, his knees almost touching mine. The driver, the same mountain of muscle from 3 months ago, pulled away from the curb without a word. "Where are you taking me?" Cassian didn't answer. He slid a sleek, dark folder onto the seat beside me. Baylight, paid in full, and a retainer for a private postnatal service. You are covered. I stared at the logo on the folder. It wasn't a hospital. It was a private security firm. We drove for less than 5 minutes before the blue and red lights filled the rearview mirror. A BHI patrol car cut us off at an intersection, blocking our path. 2 agents. their faces hidden by the brims of their caps, stepped out, hands on their sidearms. The driver stopped. Cassian didn't move, and he didn't lower his window. One of the agents tapped on the glass with a gloved knuckle. Cassian pressed a small button on his armrest. A panel on the inside of the heavily tinted window lit up, displaying something to the agent outside. The agent leaned in, read the screen, and then looked at his own datapad. I heard Cassian's voice, low and clear, through an external speaker, postnatal medical transit, Tri-Harbor Health Security Alliance. My blood ran cold. I had never heard of such a thing. It sounded impossibly official. The BHI agent looked from his pad to the car, then back to his partner. He nodded curtly. He stepped back and waved us through. The patrol car reversed, clearing the intersection. We drove on, deeper into the industrial heart of the harbor. My adrenaline was so high I felt lightheaded. I looked down at June, sleeping peacefully, unaware of the forces swirling around her. I touched the plastic bracelet on her ankle. It felt solid, too solid. I felt a slight, hard bump under the plastic band. It wasn't just a printed tag. My old phone was in my jacket pocket. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped it. I opened an app I used for verifying NFC chips embedded in high-end art prints. I held the phone's sensor near June's ankle. The screen lit up with a string of data. IDJ, Viero do B, redacted Med Ref 994, B Agency Link FSCB Priority Gamma. I read the last line twice. FSCB, the Federal Syndicate Crimes Bureau. A new kind of rage, cold and sharp, cut through my exhaustion. You, I hissed, my voice trembling. FSCB, you linked my daughter to the feds. Cassian's expression was unreadable in the dark. He had been waiting for this. They were already there, he said, his voice flat. The FSCB has been monitoring Baylight for months. They tag newborns in high-risk districts. They use them as soft anchors. Clean IDs, linked to no criminal database. They use the data traffic around those IDs to monitor network activity, track payments, watch their families. My stomach turned. They were going to use my baby as bait. Yes. They were planning to use her, an unregistered, clean ID, to monitor Blackfin's activity in this district. They were watching you because of Bray. So what did you do? I cut the line. He said, when I paid the bill, I accessed the file. They had already tagged her, so I changed the registration by linking her to Viero. I moved her jurisdiction. The bracelet still pings, but it no longer reports to the FSCB. It reports to my security. She's no longer their asset. She's under my protection. I looked out the window as the car slowed, pulling into a dark alleyway. So you just switched my owner, from the feds to the mob. For the first time, his cold calm fractured, his eyes narrowed. I am offering you shelter, Miss Ellison, not ownership. I want a way out, I said, the words spilling out, desperate. I'll go with you. I'll stay quiet. But I want a plan. A way out of all of it. Not just from Blackfin, from the FSCB, from you. I want sovereignty, for me and my daughter, not a new boss. He studied me for a long, heavy moment. The car stopped, the engine idling. We get through tonight, he said. Then we talk terms. For now, I'm taking you to Dock 9. It's clean. The freight elevator doors opened with a groan, revealing not a warehouse, but a rooftop encased in glass. It was a greenhouse. The air was warm, humid, and smelled of damp earth and mint. Rows of tomatoes, peppers, and herbs grew under soft yellow lights, a secret garden floating above the industrial wasteland of Port Wexler. A man in scrubs stood waiting. Mr. Viero. This must be Miss Ellison. I'm Dr. Kellen Rye. I'm here for your postnatal checkup. He was kind, his voice gentle. He led me to a partitioned area with a comfortable chair and medical equipment, while he took my blood pressure, explaining that I was severely dehydrated and anemic. June started to fuss in her carrier. Before I could move, Cassian was there. He lifted June with an economy of motion that was surprisingly gentle. He held her securely, his large hand supporting her head, and walked over to the glass wall overlooking the harbor. He didn't look at the view. He looked at June. He stood by a large planter of flowering mint, rocking her. I watched him. His lips were moving, but he made no sound. My artist's eye caught the detail. He wasn't whispering to her. He was counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. He was silently counting her breaths, matching his own rhythm to hers. This man, who had just bypassed a federal blockade and controlled the city's shipping, was standing in a secret garden, systematically regulating a newborn's breathing. The anger and terror that had held me together for 36 hours didn't disappear, but a fine, hairline crack appeared right down the center of my defenses. Dr. Rye's examination was gentle and blessedly brief. He pronounced me anemic, exhausted, and severely dehydrated, a completely standard diagnosis for a traumatic birth followed by a kidnapping. I supposed he gave me an iron supplement and strict instructions to rest. He was a kind man, and I realized with a jolt that he was the first person in 2 days to treat me only like a new mother and not like a piece of cargo. After he left, a woman I hadn't seen before entered the greenhouse. She was tall, severe, with dark hair pulled into a knot so tight it seemed to pull at her eyes. She moved with a silent, sharp efficiency, her footsteps making no sound on the stone floor. She carried a slim digital tablet. "Miss Ellison, I am Daria Cade," she said. Her voice was the opposite of Cassian's, where his was low and calm. Hers was a high tensile wire. "I manage Mr. Viero's logistics." She handed me the tablet. "He believed you should see this." The screen lit up. It was a file of my sketches. But they were wrong. I saw my drawing of the witness stand in courtroom 3B, but attached to it were annotations I never made, measurements of the distance to the side entrance. I saw my sketch of the judge's bench, but it was overlaid with a schematic of the security camera placements behind it. Then I saw the last one, my quick private sketch of the judge's private lobby, a place I had only glimpsed. Colin had loved that one. He said it captured the corridors of power. Here, it was rendered as a detailed floor plan, with exit routes marked in red. "Where did you get these?" I whispered, my stomach sick. "From the decrypted servers of a Blackfin associate," Daria said flatly. "Your ex-boyfriend, Colin Bray, has been selling modified copies of your artwork to them for 8 months. They weren't just following you that night. Miss Ellison, they were protecting an asset." The betrayal was so total it almost didn't hurt. It was just a cold, heavy fact. Colin hadn't just abandoned me. He had actively sold my safety, using my talent as his currency. He had put this target on my back. Anger, pure and white-hot, flooded my veins. It burned away the exhaustion. I turned as Cassian entered the room, having settled June in a nearby bassinet. "I want her name back," I demanded. He stopped, his attention shifting entirely to me. "My daughter. Her name is Juniper Ellison, not Viero. I want it fixed. I want the bracelet gone." He didn't argue. He didn't deflect. He simply nodded, as if he had been waiting for this. "Daria." The woman tapped her own tablet, and a small, portable printer on her hip whirred. She produced a single, thick sheet of cardstock. Cassian took it and handed it to me. It was not a birth certificate. It was a legal document, heavy and official, bearing an embossed seal. I didn't recognize a heavy anchor and a key. The Port Wardens Guild. "This is a private legal commitment," Cassian said. "It gives me authorization to correct the database entry within the next 72 hours. The hospital system is currently locked down by the BHI. This document overrides their authority by placing June under the Guild's temporary protection. As soon as the system is open, her name will be corrected. You have my word." I held the paper. It was a promise, but it was also a display of power. He could override the BHI. He could move pieces I didn't even know existed. A sharp buzz came from Daria's tablet. She looked up, her eyes narrow. "We have a watcher, Doc 9, street level, long lens." 2 men I hadn't noticed before, who had been standing silently by the elevator, straightened. They were built like the driver, solid and watchful. "Lev," Finch, Cashin said, his voice quiet. Soft handling, no civilians. My heart hammered. A reporter, Blackfin. I watched the two men, Lev and Finch, move to the elevator. I expected to hear shouting, maybe worse. But the confrontation was anticlimactic. Daria watched on a security feed. Lev, the larger one, walked directly into the reporter's line of sight, blocking his shot. Finch, slighter and quicker, approached from the side. There was a brief, quiet conversation. Finch pointed at the man's camera. The man argued. Finch shook his head, looking bored. He held up his own phone, as if showing the man a weather report. The reporter's face went pale. He packed his camera bag, his hands visibly shaking, and hurried away. What did he show him, I asked. A picture of his apartment building, Daria said, turning away from the screen, and a copy of his sister's work schedule. It was a polite suggestion that his camera was malfunctioning and that the air in Port Wexler was bad for his health. No violence, no blood, just a cold, precise threat that shut the problem down. No civilians, Cassian's rule. The storm outside intensified, the wind howling against the glass roof. Suddenly, the entire greenhouse plunged into darkness. The yellow grow lights, the heaters, the hum of the filters. Everything died. June let out a startled cry. A second later, low-voltage emergency lights clicked on, casting the room in a dim, unsettling red. The grid is down, Cassian said. He was already moving, lifting June from the bassinet and handing her to me. The generator is in the machine room. It's shielded. We'll be warmer there. He led the way, his hand not touching me but hovering just behind my back, guiding me through the dark rows of plants. The machine room was a small, concrete bunker built into the side of the main structure. It was loud with the heavy, rhythmic thrum of a massive diesel generator, but it was dry, and the concrete walls blocked the sound of the wind. One wall was a single, thick pane of glass, slick with rain, overlooking the dark, churning harbor. He watched me shiver, my thin hospital clothes and the blanket I clutched useless against the damp chill. He crossed the room to a metal locker and pulled out a heavy, dark wool blanket. He didn't hand it to me. He stepped close, and I was suddenly aware of his height, of the heat radiating from his body. He unfolded the blanket and wrapped it around my shoulders, his arms encircling me, pulling the wool tight around both me and the baby I held. We stood there for a long moment, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, watching the rain strike the glass. His body was a solid wall of warmth next to mine. I could smell the faint, clean scent of him, like soap and the cold night air. My exhaustion was so complete, my emotions so raw, that I felt myself leaning into his strength. Just for a second. I looked up at him. In the dim red light of the generator room, his face was all shadows and sharp angles. I saw a thin, white scar on his jawline, just below his ear, a mark I had never captured in my sketches. My hand, acting of its own accord, lifted. My fingers were trembling. I brushed the scar, a touch so light it was barely there. He went absolutely still. The rhythmic thrum of the generator seemed to fade. His gaze dropped from the window to my face. His gray eyes, usually so cold and assessing, were dark, unreadable. He didn't move. He didn't pull away. He just watched me. His breath held. "Mara," he whispered, his voice rough. "Are you sure?" I didn't know what I was sure of. I didn't know anything. I only knew that this man had been the only anchor in the entire storm. I nodded. A tiny, jerky movement. He leaned in slowly. The kiss was not what I expected. It wasn't the kiss of a mafia boss, all possession and dominance. It was hesitant. It was a question. His lips were cool from the rain, and they brushed mine gently at first, before pressing firmer as I leaned into him. It was a long kiss, a release of all the terror and tension of the last 48 hours. My free hand came up to grip his suit jacket. His hand, the one not holding the blanket, moved to the back of my neck, his fingers threading into my hair, holding me steady. His thumb stroked the skin just behind my ear. We breathed each other in, When we broke apart, we didn't move away. He rested his forehead against mine. I could feel his heart hammering against my own. We stood like that, in the thrumming red darkness, sharing the same air. He was the one who pulled back, just enough to look at me. His eyes were heavy, the control firmly back in place, but his voice was still rough. "You need to rest. You aren't healed." He respected my body, my exhaustion, more than Colin ever had. I had to ask, why that debt? It was an accident. I motioned around the room. "This is not an accidental repayment." He turned to look out the window at the harbor. I had a brother, Leo. He worked the docks. Blackfin was running a container theft ring, swapping high-value cargo. Leo found out. He paused, his jaw tightening. They made it look like an equipment failure, a crane malfunction. He was crushed. I hate Blackfin, and I hate unresolved debts. He looked back at me. "Your message. That night. It was a debt I could actually pay. It became a focus." I saw him then. Not the boss, not the savior, just a man, balancing a ledger of grief. I retreated, nursing June in the quiet of the greenhouse while the lights flickered back on. I pulled out my sketchbook, but I didn't draw the man in the suit. I drew the set of his shoulders as he counted June's breaths by the mint garden. Dr. Rye returned later, frowning at my chart. "Your iron is dangerously low. Miss Ellison, you need to eat." I waved him off, too tired, but an hour later, Daria appeared. She didn't bring hospital food. She brought a tray with a thick, rare steak, dark leafy greens, and a rich, hot broth. "Mr. Viero's orders," she said, and left it. It wasn't a suggestion. It was care, delivered with the efficiency of a command. I ate every bite, and I felt the strength, the warmth, seeping back into my bones. I was softening. Daria returned just before she left for the night. She handed me a new phone, a simple, untraceable burner. "Yours is compromised. This one is clean. Only Mr. Viero and I have the number." I nodded, setting it on the bedside table. Hours later, after June had finally settled, the new phone vibrated. A text, blocked number. My blood turned to ice. "How?" I opened it. The message was one sentence. "The bracelet is the key. They don't want the child, they want the data port." I showed the new phone to Cassian. His eyes narrowed, reading the single sentence. He didn't look surprised. He looked angry. "Daria," he called out. The woman appeared instantly. Her tablet in hand, she read the message over my shoulder, her expression as flat and cold as a circuit board. "This confirms our hypothesis," Daria said, turning to Cassian. "The bracelet, it's not just a tag, it's a harbor pass." "Speak English," I demanded, my voice shaking. "What is a harbor pass?" "It's a new biometric data card the Port Authority is beta testing," Daria explained, her voice rapid fire. "They're rolling them out as medical IDs first. They chose Baylight as a test site. The chip inside, the NFC you found, it's designed to interface with the entire port logistics data bank, scheduling, cargo manifests, crane operations. In an emergency, first responders could use it to see which areas are compromised. But the security is flawed." "Flawed how?" "It has a priority access vulnerability," Cassian said, picking up the thread. His gaze was fixed on the bracelet, which Daria had taken and was examining with a small tool, a key that opens every door. Daria nodded. "Blackfin doesn't want June. They want a clean, authenticated Harbor Pass ID. A newborn is the perfect mule. It has no criminal record, no credit history, no digital footprint. It is a ghost in the system. But because it's a pediatric medical tag, it's granted Priority 1 bandwidth in any emergency network. They plan to use that priority access as a high-speed backdoor, a way to inject malware directly into the Commercial Transport Bureau, bypassing their main firewalls." "They want to crash the port," I whispered. "Worse," Cassian countered. "They want to control it, reroute shipments, create ghost containers, empty our warehouses, and they want to do it using my name. That's why they were so eager to grab you from the hospital. Once Colin told them you were there, they assumed the Viero tag was my doing, my way of marking you. They thought they could steal my key. But the text, I said, my head spinning. The one warning me. Who sent it? A mole, Cassian said, his voice hard. Someone inside the BHI, or maybe even the FSCB. Someone who wants to see Blackfin fall but can't get their hands dirty. Or someone playing both sides. It doesn't matter. They've shown their hand, and we're going to use it. He looked at Daria. The bracelet. Can you duplicate it? I can clone the ID onto a blank, she said, but the original chip has a unique biometric signature tied to the time of birth. It's the only one that will pass a deep-level scan. The one June is wearing is the true key. My breath hitched. No, we won't use her, Cassian said, his eyes meeting mine. The intensity was startling. We will use the bracelet, but not on her. He laid out the plan. Daria would transfer June's data to a blank, unchipped, sterile hospital band. The real bracelet, the Viero Harbor Pass, would become the bait. You want to use my daughter's ID to set a trap, I said, the words tasting like ash. We have to, he said. It's the only way to expose the BHI mole and get Blackfin off your back permanently. They think that bracelet is their payday. We're going to let them try to cash it. I looked down at June, sleeping in my arms, her face a perfect, tiny picture of peace. They were talking about using her, her name, her very existence, as a piece in their war. No, I said again, but this time, it was a negotiation. Not unless I have terms. Cassian waited. I'll do it. I'll be the bait. But I want a contract, the same as that legal paper you gave me, a mother-child protection clause. I want it in writing. Signed by you, witnessed by Daria. It will state that I am doing this under duress, but that any and all risk falls to you if anything happens, if they even touch her. I want this document filed with the Tri-County Probate Court. You will be legally and financially responsible for her welfare for the rest of your life. I was bluffing. I had no idea if such a document would hold up, but I had to take the power back. A slow smile touched Daria's lips. Cassian, however, didn't hesitate. Done. Daria, draft it. Use the Guild's standard indemnity language. Make it ironclad. We moved from the warm, living greenhouse to a cold, stark room on a lower floor. It was an old lithography studio, smelling of ink and limestone. A massive, antique printing press sat in the center of the room. It was their war room. Here is the plan, Cassian said, pulling up a map of the BHI headquarters on a large screen. We leak our play. We let it be known that Mara Ellison is terrified and is going to the BHI Verdigris Concourse tomorrow morning to file an official birth certificate to get the Viero name legally expunged. How will Blackfin know? They'll know, Cassian said, because the BHI mole will tell them. Daria will leak the appointment to a BHI channel we know is compromised. Blackfin will believe you are walking right into their hands, carrying their prize. And the exit, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Lev and Finch, the two silent bodyguards, stepped forward. Pier 14, Lev said, his voice a low rumble. We've coordinated with the neutral barge crews, a refuse scow, scheduled for an 11 a.m. pickup. It's dirty, but it's invisible. Daria was already at a terminal, her fingers flying. She held the Viero bracelet. I'm embedding a metadata tracker in the chip's firmware. It's dormant. It will only activate when it passes the specific frequency of a BHI checkpoint scanner. When they scan it, it will create a digital tripwire, logging the exact data channel they use to communicate. We'll have their entire back door. The pieces were moving so fast, I felt like I was drowning. Cassian saw it. He stepped away from the maps and stood in front of me. Mara, he waited until I met his eyes. When we are in that building, you will be scared. You need to focus. I have rules. The 3-3-30. Remember it. What is that? 3 distractions, Warti, he said, holding up 3 fingers. If you are cornered, you have 3 built-in distractions. A fire alarm, a dropped-in progress medical emergency, a security alert. Daria will have one ready. Lev and Finch are the other 2. Use them. 3 exits, Always know 3 ways out. The front door is the first, the service stairs are the second, the refuse ferry at Pier 14 is the third. Never walk into a room without knowing them. And 30 seconds. That is the window. When an event happens, you have 30 seconds to make your decision before someone else makes it for you. You don't freeze, you move. And one more rule, my rule. His eyes were steel. No threats, no weapons, not in front of the child. Lev and Finch know. We draw them in. We expose them. But we do it clean. Understood. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He turned back to the screen. All business again. He was coordinating with Daria, checking the timing of the leak against the barge schedule. He pulled out his own secure phone to cross-reference something. I saw the screen for just a second. He was in a file directory. There was a folder labeled Harbor Pass, and inside it, a single file. He hadn't named it June, or Ellison, or Baby. It was labeled Asset 1129. "What is that?" I asked, my voice flat. He didn't look up, preoccupied. "What is what?" "Asset 1129. That's my daughter to you. An asset number." He stopped typing. He slowly looked up from his phone, and the mask of the boss, the strategist, was gone. He looked almost lost. "No," he said, his voice quiet. 11/29, November 29th. I stared at him. "It's the date. Mara," he said. "The day you sent the wrong text." My heart did a painful, complicated flip. He had classified her. Not with a cold, random number, but with the day our worlds had collided. It was the most calculating and, terrifyingly, the most sentimental thing I had ever seen. I was strapped to a rocket, and this man was holding the match, all because of a single, 3-month-old mistake. The verdigris concourse was a canyon of glass and wet stone. The rain had followed us downtown, and the high, atrium-style windows leaked, leaving slick patches on the marble floor that the harried cleaning droids kept missing. The air was thick with the smell of damp wool and bureaucratic anxiety. It was a sea of people, dotted with the distinctive sea-green vests of the Bureau of Harbor Integrity. I walked. Cassian was 2 steps behind me, a silent shadow. Lev and Finch flanked us, invisible in the crowd, just 2 more men in dark coats. I held June, her new, blank bracelet feeling flimsy on her ankle. The bait, the heavy Viero bracelet, was in my pocket, its metal cold against my fingers. An earpiece, no larger than a speck of dust, sat in my left ear. "Keep moving toward the main desk," Daria's voice whispered, a sterile, digital presence. "They are watching. They're tracking the appointment." My heart felt like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. My palms were so sweaty I was afraid I would drop the folder of fake documents. This was the 3330. I knew my exits, the main door behind us, the service hallway to my right, and the escalators to the sub-level garage, which led to Pier 14. 30 seconds. We reached the front of the line. A BHI agent with a bored expression motioned us forward. Before I could speak, a different agent stepped in front of us. He was older, with a network of broken capillaries on his nose and eyes that were too quick, too sharp. His name tag read, Rex Talbot. "Mara Ellison," he said, his voice a gravelly, false-friendly rumble. He was the mole. He had to be. "Yes, I have an appointment to correct a birth registration," I started, my voice trembling. Talbot smiled. Of course. We've got a flag on that file. Looks like there's a persistent data error. We'll need to do a full rescan. Can you come with me? Please, we'll use room 4B. It has the deep scan equipment." The trap. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Scrub 4B, Daria's voice snapped in my ear. "It's a shielded room. No signal. Reroute. Reroute now." I froze. My 30 seconds were evaporating. Cassian stepped forward, his body moving between me and Talbot. He didn't look at the agent. He looked at me, his gray eyes pinning me, holding me steady. He took June from my arms. "I'll hold her," he said, his voice calm. He adjusted her blanket, his movements economical, and then met my eyes again. "Breathe." The elevators are right there, I stammered, pointing past Talbot toward the sign for the archives. My appointment sheet said the micro archives, not room 4B. Talbot's smile tightened. The archives are just for paper. Ma'am, this is a digital problem. Then we'll use the public checkpoint, Cassian said, his voice polite but edged with steel. He was already moving, guiding me with a hand on my back, walking directly toward the main security checkpoint that led to the archives. Sir, you can't, Talbot started, moving to follow. Distraction 1, Daria whispered. Levant, who had been waiting in the adjacent line, suddenly stumbled. He wasn't clumsy. It was a precise, controlled fall, and he took a metal stanchion and a massive overflowing tray of paper files with him. Documents exploded into the air, a blizzard of white paper. The crowd surged back. Move, Cassian ordered. We were through the chaos in a second. Talbot was blocked by the mess and the shouting BHI agents. We were at the checkpoint, a simple metal arch. The bracelet, Cassian said, his voice low. I fumbled in my pocket, my fingers numb. I pulled out the Viero bracelet. Hold it up to the scanner, Daria said. Now. A BHI guard at the scanner looked up, annoyed. Ma'am, you have to go through one at a time. I ignored him and held the bracelet near the pad. The machine didn't just beep, it chimed, a soft, priority tone. The guard's screen flashed green. Pediatric medical priority. It's active. Daria's voice was sharp, excited. The channel is open, they're on the hook. I'm in. The moment of triumph lasted half a second. Hold them! Talbot's voice roared from across the concourse. He had pushed his way through. There's a technical error with the child's ID, secure the infant. 2 BHI agents moved to block our path. This was it. No guns, no violence. Cassian stopped. He held June against his chest. He didn't raise his voice. He reached into his coat and produced the document I had signed, the heavy cardstock, now stamped with a bright red seal from the Tri-County Probate Court. This child is under a temporary protection order from the court, Cassian said, his voice cutting through the noise. You are interfering with a legal guardianship. Agent Talbot, that is a Class B felony. Talbot stopped dead. He stared at the red seal. He knew exactly what it was. He knew what kind of power it took to get that seal overnight. He hesitated. But he had orders. That order is void, he snarled, bluffing. The child is a data risk. Caesar... He lunged. Now, Daria said. The world dissolved into noise. A deafening fire alarm blared. Red lights flashed, and from the ceiling, metal security shutters began to descend, slamming down with the sound of cannons, partitioning the concourse. Distraction 2, Daria said. Go! People were screaming, running for the exits. Talbot was momentarily disoriented by the noise. Service stairs Finch. The quieter bodyguard appeared at my elbow. He grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the door marked maintenance. We plunged into the relative quiet of a concrete stairwell. Finch led, I followed, my legs shaking. I was already weak. I had given birth less than 2 days ago. I stumbled, my vision graying at the edges. Finch, I panted. I can't run. The door at the bottom of the stairs burst open. It was Cassian. He had June tucked securely in the crook of one arm, held against his chest. He didn't speak. He handed June to Finch, who took her with impracticed, gentle grip. Then Cassian turned his back to me and knelt. Get on. What? Get on, he commanded. We don't have time. I climbed onto his back. My arms went around his neck, my face pressed against his suit jacket. He stood up as if I weighed nothing. He took June back from Finch, settling her again in the one-armed cradle. Finch led, gun now drawn, sweeping the corridor. Cassian followed, carrying both of us. We were in the basement. It was a labyrinth of massive, humming machinery. The floor was slick with condensation. Suddenly, a new sound, the roar of water, the emergency pumps. They're flooding the sublevel. Finch yelled over the noise. Protocol for a fire! A wave of hot, ankle-deep water washed over the floor. Cassian didn't slow. He moved through the steam, past a row of massive, scalding hot pipes, his steps certain. I could feel the coiled strength in his back, the rhythmic tension of his muscles as he moved. I held on, burying my face against him, my breath sinking with his. 1, 2, 3, as he navigated the slick concrete. Finch kicked open a final door, and we were on a loading dock. The rain hit us like a solid wall. A large, stinking refuse truck was backed up to the bay. Finch opened the side door. Go, go! Cassian practically threw me into the cab, sliding in behind me and taking June back as Finch climbed into the driver's seat. The engine roared, and the truck lurched forward, driving off the dock and into the flooded street. We were clear. 10 minutes later, the truck rolled onto the rattling metal deck of the Pier 14 refuse scow. The ferry horn blared, a sound so low it vibrated in my teeth. We were moving, pulling away from the pier, leaving the flashing red lights of the BHI headquarters behind us, a fading, angry glow in the heavy rain. I was shaking. The adrenaline was leaving my body, and the cold, violent shivers were setting in. My teeth chattered so hard I couldn't speak. "You're in shock," Cassian said. He was looking at June. She was fussing, her face red, sensing my panic. "She's cold," I stammered, my hands too numb to fix her blanket. Cassian unbuttoned his suit jacket and his shirt. He lifted June and placed her directly against the skin of his chest. He pulled his shirt and jacket closed around her, cocooning her in his body heat. He held her there, his large hand covering her back, his chin resting on the top of her head. June's cries quieted, replaced by a soft, contented sigh. He looked up at me, his gray eyes in the dim cab light no longer cold, no longer assessing. They were just present. On the deck of a garbage scow, surrounded by the noise of the harbor and the smell of diesel, the three of us breathed. The storm raged, but inside the cab, it was quiet. Warehouse 27 in the Harbor Line district was nothing like the greenhouse. The greenhouse had been a laboratory, a sterile glass bubble. This was a home. The elevator opened directly into a sprawling loft apartment, all old-growth timber beams, exposed brick, and worn leather furniture. It was warm, dry, and it smelled like wood smoke and old books. Lev and Finch did a quiet sweep and then disappeared, melting back into the city. Daria was at a built-in desk in the corner, her back to us, her fingers already flying across a keyboard. June was asleep, tucked against Cassian's chest, still inside his jacket. I was soaked, my body feeling like one raw, exposed nerve. "You need a shower," Cassian said. He didn't look at me. He was focused on June. "There are clothes in the closet. They should fit. Daria." Daria appeared at my side without turning around. "This way, Miss Ellison." The shower was hot, and I stood under the water for a long time. Letting the steam unclog my lungs, I let the blood and grime of the BHI building and the refuse scow circle the drain. I felt the last 2 days wash away, but the exhaustion was bone deep. The clothes in the closet were simple. Soft black sweats and a thick wool sweater. They were expensive, and they fit perfectly. When I came out, June was in a proper bassinet by a fireplace, and Cassian was in the kitchen. He was fumbling. The sight was so strange it stopped me in my tracks. He still wore his suit trousers and the white shirt, now hopelessly wrinkled and damp, but his sleeves were rolled up. He was staring at a stove with an expression of intense, frustrated concentration. He had an open bag of steel-cut oats, a carton of milk, and a pot. He was making oatmeal. He glanced up, saw me watching, and his jaw tightened. "It's the only thing I know how to make," he said. His voice clipped, defensive. He turned back to the stove, added honey, stirred. He added a handful of dried raisins. He poured it into a bowl and pushed it across the counter toward me. It was hot. It was sweet. It was the single most normal, grounding thing that had happened to me in 3 days, and the sheer domestic absurdity of this man, this calculating, dangerous harbor king who had just carried me on his back through a flooded basement, making me breakfast at 3 in the morning, made something inside me shatter. I started to laugh. It wasn't a giggle. It was a hysterical, exhausted, half-sobbing laugh that I couldn't stop. Cassian froze, his hand on the counter, looking at me as if I had finally, completely broken. "I'm sorry," I gasped, wiping my eyes, the hot tears mixing with the laughter. "It's just, oatmeal." He didn't smile, but the tension in his shoulders eased. He just waited for me to finish, then pushed the bowl closer. "Eat, Mara, you're shaking." I ate. Later, when the city was a dark, pre-dawn gray. I sat by the fire, my sketchbook open. I wasn't drawing, I was just looking at the pages I'd already filled, the sketch of him in the greenhouse, counting June's breaths, a quick, rough charcoal of his shoulders as he shielded us on the scow. He was on the other side of the room, on the phone, his voice a low, lethal murmur. Daria was gone, it was just us. When he hung up, the silence in the loft was heavy. "I feel guilty," I said, my voice quiet. He turned. "We're safe. The BHI is in chaos. Daria's tracker worked. You have nothing to feel guilty about." "No," I said, shaking my head. I looked at the sketch. "I feel guilty because I feel safe. Here, with you. You are this. You are what you are. You threaten people with pictures of their families. You have men with guns. And you are the only person who has kept me and my daughter safe. The only one." I looked up, my eyes burning. What does that make me to feel safe in this? He walked across the room and sat in the armchair opposite me. He looked at the fire for a long time before he spoke. "My mother, Luisa, she owned a flower shop, Viero's, in Meridian Square. It was the first business my father bought when he came here, the first clean thing he owned." He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "She ran it for 30 years. I worked there, after school. She taught me how to handle the inventory, especially the roses. They're fragile. You can't just bunch them. You snap the stems." He looked at his own large, calloused hands. "She taught me how to hold one. You have to support the head, right under the bloom, or the weight will break the neck. You let the stem rest. You don't grip." He met my gaze. "I'm good with June for the same reason I'm good at my business. I understand structural integrity. I know where the weak points are. I know how to support the weight." I closed my sketchbook. I understood. His gentleness and his violence came from the same source, a place of cold, precise calculation. June was asleep in the bassinet. The fire was warm. The storm outside had finally quieted to a drizzle. I was so tired I felt drugged. He stood up. "You should sleep. The bed in the master." "Where will you sleep?" "Here, on the couch." "Cassian." He stopped. I stood up, my body aching. I walked over to him, stopping just in front of him. I was small, barefoot on the cold floor, looking up at him. I reached out and tentatively took his hand. His skin was warm. He looked down at our joined hands. He didn't move. I leaned in and kissed him. It was slow. There was no desperation, no fear. It was just a fact. His other hand came up, not to my neck this time, but to the small of my back, holding me, steadying me. I felt the slight tremor in my own shoulders, the last of the adrenaline leaving. His lips were soft, and he tasted faintly of the coffee he had been drinking. "We just take this as it comes," I whispered against his mouth, borrowing his own philosophy. He kissed me again, deeper, and his hand sliding up my back, pulling me closer. It was warm, and it was real. And my body, my battered, postpartum body, finally felt like my own. I was the one who pulled away. I was exhausted. The kiss had taken the last of my strength. He understood. He didn't push, didn't demand. He just put his forehead against mine, just as he had in the generator room. He held me, letting me borrow his strength. We stayed like that, just breathing. He walked me to the bedroom, and I collapsed onto the bed. He pulled a heavy quilt over me, and when I looked up, he was still standing in the doorway, watching. "Rest, Mara," he said, and he pulled the door almost closed, leaving just a crack of light from the fire. I woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of voices. Sunlight, weak but real, was streaming through the windows. I felt human. I walked into the main room. Daria was there, her screen projecting a map of the harbor. Cassian, in a fresh shirt, handed me a mug of coffee. "They took it," Daria said, not looking up. "The bait has been moved. It's on a cargo ship called the Night Heron, Blackfin's primary transport for stolen goods. The tracker is pinging every 5 minutes. We have them." "So what now?" I asked, sipping the coffee. "Now we cut the head off the snake," Cassian said, his voice flat. "Daria, get the peer team ready. I want—" "No." They both stopped and looked at me. "No," I said again, my voice stronger. "No more running, no more dark ops. You don't get it. They won't stop. Blackfin, the FSCB. They will always see her as a key, unless I make her a person." "Mara, this is the time to strike," Cassian said, his patience thin. "You strike, they strike back, and June will be caught in the middle. I'm done being bait. I want her name back. My name, Ellison. I want it on a legal document, filed in a court. I want her untagged. I want her free. That is the priority, not your war with Blackfin." He stared at me, his jaw set. I could see the internal battle, the strategist warring with the protector. He conceded. "Daria," he said, his voice tight, "cancel the peer team. Get Hollis Crane on the line." "Hollis?" Daria looked shocked. "He's a civil probate lawyer. He's clean." "That's the point," Cassian said. "Schedule an emergency hearing at the Tri-County Probate Court tomorrow morning. Petition for sole custody for Mara Ellison and an emergency order to correct the state-issued identification." He was giving in. He was choosing my path. Daria's fingers flew. "Done. 10 a.m. Judge Eleanor March. She's tough. Cassian, but she's fair." "Good." "One more thing," Daria said, her voice dropping. "I've been analyzing the data from the BHI scanner, the channel they used to send the bracelet data to the Night Heron. It wasn't just a Blackfin channel. It was double encrypted. The second encryption key belongs to the FSCB." I looked at Cassian. His face was like stone. "Talbot," he breathed, "he's not just a BHI mole for Blackfin. He is FSCB." "It was a double cross," Daria confirmed. "The FSCB wasn't just letting Blackfin try to steal the data. They were helping them. They were feeding Blackfin to you, Cassian, while using Talbot to secure the master key, June's bracelet, for themselves. They were playing everyone. We were completely, totally surrounded. The mob on one side, the feds on the other, and we were in the middle." Cassian looked at me, his gaze so intense it pinned me to the floor. This just got harder. Mara, going to court means walking into their house. The BHI, the FSCB, they will be there. "I have to," I said. "It's the only way." He nodded, a single, sharp motion. "Then I'll walk in with you. I'll step into the light with you, as long as you don't let go of my hand halfway." I looked at the man who had brought me oatmeal and promised me war, all in the same day. I couldn't make that promise, but I nodded. Courtroom 8B of the Tri-County Probate Court was cold. It was a modern, sterile room, all blonde wood and brushed steel, designed to make human misery look efficient. Judge Eleanor March sat elevated, her face a mask of intelligent neutrality. She had read the emergency filing. Hollis Crane, my new lawyer, was the opposite of Cassian. He was a small, neat man in a slightly rumpled suit, but his voice was a precise, powerful instrument. He stood beside me at the petitioner's table. June was in her bassinet at my feet, blessedly silent. "Your Honor," Hollis began, "we're here on a simple matter of identity. A clerical error made at the Baylight Birth Center resulted in my client's newborn daughter, Juniper Ellison, being tagged with an incorrect identification bracelet. We are asking for an emergency order to correct the state database and issue a new, correct ID." He laid it out with crisp efficiency. He presented the affidavit from the Baylight midwife. He presented the forged intake data. He presented Cassian's private legal commitment, the one from the Port Wardens Guild, as evidence of our attempts to fix this before it escalated. It seems straightforward. Mr. Crane, Judge March said, her eyes scanning the documents. But the Bureau of Harbor Integrity filed an emergency countermotion this morning. They are petitioning to intervene. I find that unusual for a birth certificate correction. As do we, Your Honor, Hollis said, but we are prepared to argue against their motion. Then let's hear from the BHI, the judge said, looking toward the respondents' table. My heart stopped. Rex Talbot stood up, his face set in a mask of oily concern. Agent Rex Talbot, Your Honor, representing the Bureau of Harbor Integrity's Data Security Division. A ripple of confusion went through the small courtroom. Agent Talbot, the judge said, her voice sharp. My docket says this is about a baby's name. Your division handles cargo logistics and network security. Please explain your presence. It's the same issue, Your Honor, Talbot said, sliding his own folder onto the table. The identification tag on this infant is not a simple hospital bracelet. It is a prototype harbor pass, a biometric device with deep integration into the city's critical infrastructure. The bracelet in Miss Ellison's possession has been flagged as compromised. It represents a clear and present danger to the security of Port Wexler. I gripped the edge of the table. He was doing it, right here, in the open. Therefore, Talbot continued, the BHI is filing a motion for temporary protective custody of the infant. The courtroom gasped. Hollis was on his feet. And in order, Talbot pushed on. To secure the compromised device and perform a full diagnostic scan to contain the data breach, we must remove the child from the mother's care until the asset is secured. Outrageous, Hollis boomed. This is a kidnapping petition, Your Honor, disguised as a security protocol. They are not trying to protect the city. They are trying to seize my client's daughter. Mr. Crane, control yourself, Judge March warned, but her eyes were fixed on Talbot, hard as diamonds. Cassian sat in the third row. Directly behind me, I could feel his presence. He was perfectly still, his hands resting on his knees. He looked like a bored spectator, but I could see his right hand, loosely curled. He was holding the decoy bracelet. His gaze was locked on Talbot, a blade in its sheath. Agent Talbot, Hollis said, his voice now a low, dangerous thrum. You claim the bracelet is compromised. When exactly did this compromise occur? Our systems flagged it yesterday morning. We believe the mother, Miss Ellison, may have accessed it improperly. Talbot said, Is that so? Hollis smiled, a cold, thin expression. He picked up his own tablet. Your Honor, I'd like to present BHI's own metadata logs, acquired by my client's security team. He projected Daria's map onto the courtroom screens. It was a spiderweb of data. This map shows the bracelet's activity. As you can see, the ID was dormant until 10:17 a.m. yesterday. That is when Miss Ellison presented it at the Verdigris Concourse checkpoint. But look here. He pointed to a new line, a red one. At 10:18 a.m., 1 minute later, the ID's data was copied and routed through a BHI internal server, your server, Agent Talbot, and from there. Hollis zoomed out. The red line shot across the map, ending at a cargo ship docked in the outer harbor. It was routed to a ship called the Night Heron, a vessel. I might add, with known affiliations to the Blackfin Syndicate. You claim my client compromised this ID. The BHI stole this ID and broadcast it to a criminal organization. The color drained from Talbot's face. He was trapped. Judge March leaned forward, her expression thunderous. She looked past me, past Hollis, and into the gallery. Miss Ellison, may I see Mr. Cassian Viero is in this courtroom. Are you aware of who he is? The room went silent. This was the real question. I stood up, my legs shaking. Yes, Your Honor. And are you aware of his reputation, his business? Yes, Your Honor. And you are here, with him, petitioning this court. I looked at Hollis, who gave me a small nod. I looked at Cassian, who met my gaze, steady and calm. Then I looked at the judge. I am aware of who Mr. Viero is, I said, my voice clear and strong. I also know that when my daughter was born, 2 different organizations the one Agent Talbot works for, and the one he's selling to tried to turn my child into a data key. They tried to use her as bait, as a weapon, mister. Vieiro was the only person who respected my decisions. He was the only one who asked me what I wanted. He's the only one who has treated my daughter like a child and not like a compromised asset. So, yes, he is here, supporting my petition. Judge March held my gaze for a long, heavy second. She had her answer. The BHI's motion for protective custody is denied, she said, her voice ringing with finality. This court finds the Bureau's actions in this matter to be, at best, grossly negligent. I am ordering the immediate correction of the state database. I am ordering... A deafening alarm blared. It wasn't the BHI alarm. It was the building's fire alarm. Strobe lights flashed. Badoom, badoom, badoom. Heavy steel security gates slammed down over the courtroom doors, over the windows, sealing us in. This is Blackfin. I whispered. The panic was cold and immediate. They hadn't waited. They were coming for June, right here. People were screaming. Judge March was banging her gavel, but no one could hear her. 3330, Cashin's voice said. He was suddenly at my side. He wasn't yelling. He was just present. Lev, Finch, now. Levma, who had been in the gallery, leaped over the railing. He didn't go for a gun. He ran to the court clerk's desk and slammed his hand on the emergency legal database terminal. Emergency procedures, he roared. Title 9, Section 4. The judge's authority is absolute during a lockdown. Open that technical access door. He was creating a legal, procedural distraction using their own rules against them. Finch was already at a small, unmarked panel by the judge's bench. He had a tool in his hand, and he ripped the panel open, wires sparking. Got it! A side door, one I hadn't even seen, clicked open. It led to a private hallway. Go, Cashin commanded. He scooped the entire bassinet with June inside into one arm. Mara, the files. I grabbed Hollis's folder. We ran. We plunged into the hallway. It was already filling with thick, gray smoke pouring from the vents. They're using the fire system to mask their entry, Finch yelled, leading the way. We burst through a set of double doors into the parking garage. The air was clearer, but the alarms were deafening. There. Rex Talbot was standing between us and the exit ramp. He wasn't alone. 2 large men in BHI vests flanked him. They weren't agents. They were Blackfin muscle, disguised. The bracelet, Vieiro, Talbot snarled. Give it to me, or they'll take the kid. I can't stop them. He was making his final play, trying to get the key for himself. Cashin stopped. He was calm. He looked at Talbot, then at the men, then back to Talbot. He reached into his pocket. He tossed the decoy bracelet. It skittered across the concrete, landing at Talbot's feet. The silver Vieiro nameplate gleamed. Talbot's eyes lit up with greedy triumph. He bent to snatch it. The bait is taken, he hissed, believing he had won. Daria, now, Cashin said into a microphone I couldn't see. In the pocket of my jacket, the burner phone Daria had given me vibrated. It was a single, preset message, a confirmation. Sent. Talbot's own datapad lit up, then the datapad of his men, then every phone in the vicinity. Daria had just hit send. She had released everything, the metadata map, the Night Heron's cargo log, the encrypted time-stamped proof linking Rex Talbot's BHI server directly to the FSCB, and then to Blackfin. She had sent it to the Port Wexler Council's public inbox, every major news outlet in the city, and the court's press room, which was currently locked outside our courtroom, just waiting for a story. Talbot's face turned white. He had the bracelet, but he had just lost the world. Let's go, Cassian said, and he walked past the stunned, frozen men toward the exit. The data bomb Daria had detonated in the courthouse parking garage was not a single explosion. It was a cluster charge, and the shrapnel was already flying. As Lev sped through the back streets in a nondescript utility van, away from the chaos, we listened to the city's emergency broadcasts light up. Daria, in her cold, calculating genius, had released two narratives. The real one, the one that would stick, was the complex, undeniable proof, the metadata, the BHI server logs, the FSCB encryption, and the time-stamped evidence of Talbot's treachery. That was for the Port Council and the serious press. But she had also released a second story, a crude, simple lie for the criminal underworld. The message was simple. The Viero bracelet is the master key to the port, and it's on the Night Heron. It's a rumor, designed to panic them, Cassian said from the back of the van, his voice tight. We were heading for the water, the smell of the harbor growing stronger. Blackfin can't afford to be caught with that ship, not now, but they also can't afford to lose the key. They'll move on the Heron. And the FSCB, I asked, clutching June. They're on fire. Daria's voice came over the van's secure speaker. She was already at a secondary command post. Talbot is compromised. The entire operation is toxic. They are moving to contain the blast. They're deploying, but not to the courthouse. They are heading straight for the Night Heron. To clean up their partners, Cassian finished, his face grim. He had predicted this. A purge. We didn't go back to the loft. Lev pulled the van to a stop at a private industrial pier, dark and slick with rain. The Osprey was waiting. It was a tugboat, short, powerful, and ugly, its paint chipped, smelling of diesel and rust. A man with a face like cured leather, Captain Midas Rowe, stood at the wheel. He gave Cassian a single, curt nod and cast off the lines. The boat's powerful engine thrummed, and we slid out of the slip into the black, churning water. We are only here to watch, Cassian said, pulling me into the small, cramped wheelhouse. Daria needs visual confirmation. Confirmation of what? I yelled over the engine and the rising wind. Of the betrayal, he said. The moment we cleared the protection of the inner harbor, the storm hit us. This wasn't rain. It was a physical assault. The sea, which had been merely choppy, rose up in black, mountainous waves. The sky and the water were one. The Osprey climbed a sheer wall of water and hung there, suspended, before crashing into the trough with a sound like the hull was splitting in two. I was thrown against the bulkhead. June, ripped from her sleep, let out a high, thin wail of pure terror. The sound was almost lost in the howl of the wind. "She's freezing," I shouted, trying to shield her. The cabin was unheated, and the cold was a living thing. Cassian was already moving. He ripped off his heavy outer rain slicker. He unzipped the jacket he wore, the same one from the courthouse. His movements were economical, certain, balancing against the violent roll of the boat. He took June from my arms. He placed her against his chest, skin to skin. He zipped the jacket up, trapping her in a cocoon of his own body heat, her small head tucked under his chin. Then he pulled the heavy oilcloth slicker back on, sealing them both against the storm. June's cries, muffled against his chest, subsided into a faint, exhausted whimper, and then silence. My adrenaline was gone, leaving only a hollow, vibrating exhaustion. I slid to the deck, my back against the vibrating wall. "Mara," his voice was low, right beside me. He was kneeling, in the dark cabin. He was a mountain of shadow and damp wool. He put his arm around my shoulders, bracing me against the pitch of the boat, pulling me against his side. "Breathe with me." I leaned my head against his shoulder. I felt the slow, steady rhythm of his breathing. In 2, 3, out, 2, 3. I closed my eyes. I heard the ocean trying to tear the boat apart. I felt the thrum of the engine. I felt his heart, beating steadily under my ear. I was not safe, but I was anchored. "We're on them," Midas Rowe grunted from the wheel. I opened my eyes. Through the rain-lashed windscreen, I saw it. The Night Heron, anchored off Breakwater Bend, lit up like a floating prison. Floodlights cutting cones of white into the black rain. We could see figures on deck, moving with frantic, panicked energy. "Daria's microdrone is airborne," Cassian murmured. He had a pair of night vision binoculars to his eyes. "They're on the container deck. They're cutting." We watched, Sparks flew, a brilliant, frantic display against the dark. They were using plasma cutters on a single specific container near the bow, a container stenciled with 2 large white letters VH. Viero Holdings, the bait. The heavy steel door of the container crashed to the deck. The Blackfin crew surged inside. And, wait for it, Cassian said. A bright, blue-white flash erupted from within the container. It was silent from our distance, but it lit up the deck. Daria's decoy, a network of dummy transmitters designed to mimic a massive data surge, a master key activating. They think they have it, I whispered. And then the feds came. 3 of them, low, gray, fast attack boats, cutting through the storm like sharks. They came from 3 different directions, their engines screaming. Searchlights pinned the night heron in a cage of light. FSCB, hands in the air, you are under arrest for violations of the Harbor Integrity Act, a voice boomed over a loudspeaker, cutting through the wind. The Blackfin men, pouring from the Viero container, holding the key, were caught. They were surrounded. They're arresting them, I said, stunned. They're not helping them, they're arresting them. The purge, Cassian said, his voice flat. Talbot is a liability. The email Daria sent made him toxic. The FSCB is cutting off the diseased limb. They're cleaning house, arresting the very partners they were using to secure the port. It's a tidy, public solution. It was brilliant. It was brutal. The 3 FSCB patrol boats, their blue and red lights now flashing, began to circle their prize. Their combined wake, colliding with the storm surge, created a rogue wave. It hit the Osprey broadside. The boat was thrown sideways, a violent, bone-jarring lurch. I was ripped from my seat. The world turned 90 degrees. I heard Midas Rowe swear as the engine screamed. Before I could even register the fall, Cassian moved. He threw his body over mine, his back to the wall, his arms a cage around both me and the baby. He knelt on the heaving deck, a solid, unmovable shield. The boat groaned, shuddered, and slowly righted itself, water sluicing from its decks. He didn't move for a full 10 seconds. He just held us, taking the impact, making sure we were stable. I looked up. His face was inches from mine. It was soaked. Rain and sea spray dripping from his jaw, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, but his eyes were locked on mine. They were not cold. They were not calculating. They were a profound, absolute gray. They were as steady as the bedrock under the harbor. "Are you all right?" he breathed, his voice rough. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. Midas Rowe turned the tug, and we slipped away from the lights, away from the arrests, into the mouth of Inlet 4. The channel was a dark cut, marked by the skeletons of old piers. As we slid through the calm water, the lights of the city spread out before us, a watercolor bleeding in the rain. I thought of his rule: no civilians, no one innocent gets hurt. He had just dismantled his 2 greatest enemies, Blackfin and the corrupt federal agents, in a single night, and he had done it without a single gunshot, without a single life lost. He had used their own greed as the bullet. He was stepping into the light. I felt it, and I knew. As I sat there in the dark, my hand found his, and I held on. My phone buzzed. The burner. A text from Daria. Visual confirmation complete. Drone footage recorded Blackfin B and E. FSCB broadcast confirmed the arrests. Talbot is in custody. The case is closed. The networks are calling it the biggest internal corruption bust in a decade. We need to go back to court. Finish it. 10 a.m. We were safe. The war was over. Tomorrow, I said, as the Osprey bumped against the dark pier, we go back to Judge March. Yes, Cassian said. He was looking down at June, who was stirring inside his jacket. We finish it, but when I walk into that courtroom tomorrow, it won't be as the head of the Viero concern. I looked at him, confused by the sudden hesitation in his voice. Hollis is filing an addendum to our petition tonight, he said, finally looking at me. The strategist was gone. This was something else. I'm testifying as a party to the case, as the individual who signed the Baylight intake forms, as the temporary guardian who filed the guild protection, I am formally submitting myself to Judge March's authority. My breath caught. Cassian, they'll destroy you, a probate judge. With that kind of authority, they will open an investigation into everything. Let them, he said. You wanted a way out. You wanted to walk in the light, Mara. You can't be clean if you're standing next to me while I'm still in the shadows. So, I'm stepping out. The hallway of the Tri-County Courthouse was a circus. The anonymous email Daria had sent had done its job. News vans from every local station were parked on the street, their satellite masts raised. The corridor was a choked mass of reporters, city officials in suits, and curious onlookers, all shouting questions. The Port Wexler Council, blindsided by the scandal, had convened an emergency public hearing in the main atrium. Our return was different. We weren't slipping in through a side door. We walked, flanked by Lev and Finch, directly through the center of the crowd. Hollis Crane went first, parting the sea of bodies like a small, determined tugboat. I followed, holding June, who was wide awake, her eyes taking in the chaos. Cassian was at my back. I could feel his presence, a solid wall of heat and focus. He was no longer the shadow in the gallery. He was walking into the light, just as he'd promised. Mr. Viero, is it true the FSCB was in business with Blackfin? Miss Ellison, were you a willing participant? Who is the child's father? Mr. Viero. We ignored it all. We entered courtroom 8B. The security gates were open, the smoke was gone, the room was packed. At the front, Judge Eleanor March sat, her face like granite. The room went silent. We are reconvening the emergency hearing in the matter of Ellison Juniper, Judge March said, her voice cutting through the tension. In light of the evidence and the significant public interest this court has received, I am expanding the scope of this hearing. She looked directly at Cassian. Mr. Viero, you filed an addendum to this petition. You wish to testify. I do, Your Honor, Cassian said. He didn't wait to be called. He walked past the bar and stood at the witness stand. He was not sworn in. He was making a public declaration. Your Honor, he began, his voice calm and clear, filling the room. I am Cassian Viero. I am the sole managing partner of the Viero Holdings concern, and 3 nights ago, at the Baylight Birth Center, I instructed my associates to access the hospital database and change the name of this child from Ellison to Viero. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Hollis Crane sat perfectly still. I did this, Cassian continued, his eyes locked on the judge. Without the mother's consent, but not with malicious intent. The child's file had already been tagged by the Federal Syndicate Crimes Bureau as part of an illegal data mining operation. Their tag, the Harbor Pass prototype, was a backdoor into the city's infrastructure. By changing the name, I moved the child's data file from a public, compromised server to my own private, secure one. It was an act of data security. You broke the law, Mr. Viero, Judge March stated. Yes, Cassian said without hesitation. I usurped the BHI's authority. I usurped the FSCB's authority. And I usurped Miss Ellison's parental authority. I did it to protect a newborn child from being used as a data key by 2 warring factions, one criminal and one corrupt. My methods were outside the law. The threat was 2. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, landing on the press section. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm not asking for immunity. I am here to state on the public record what was done and why. And I'm asking this court to do one thing to recognize the immediate and total failure of the state's protective agencies and to restore, unconditionally, the full parental rights of the only person in this equation who has acted with honor. Restore the name Ellison to this child and give Mara Ellison her daughter back, free and clear. He finished. The silence was absolute. Judge March turned her gaze to me. Miss Ellison, you have heard this. Admission. Do you have anything to say? I stood up, my legs shaking. I walked to the petitioner's table. Yes, Your Honor. I looked at the judge, at the press, and then at Cassian. The name on that first bracelet, Viero. It was a violation, but it was also a shield. It was the only thing that stood between my daughter and the men who wanted to turn her into a key, a piece of cargo. Cassian Viero gave her that shield. I reached down and touched the new blank bracelet on June's ankle. But a shield is not a home. The name Ellison is her home. I am her home. I am her mother. I am asking this court to give me the paperwork to prove it. Judge March stared at me, then at Cassian. For a long, heavy beat, she closed the file in front of her. This court is, frankly, stunned, she said. Stunned by the depravity of the BHI's actions and stunned by the candor of this testimony. The evidence emailed to this court last night, which has been verified, is overwhelming. She banged her gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. Temporary order, effective immediately. 1. This court grants sole legal and physical custody of the infant, Juniper, to her mother, Mara Ellison. The state database is to be corrected within the hour. 2. This court is issuing a bench warrant for the immediate arrest of BHI agent Rex Talbot on charges of conspiracy, kidnapping, and data fraud. And 3, she said, her eyes finding the BHI lawyers cowering in the back. I am ordering the full, immediate audit of the BHI's servers to be conducted by an independent master appointed by this court. A roar went up from the press. It was over. And then, chaos. From the back of the room, a man's voice shouted, "He's running!" It was Rex Talbot. He hadn't been arrested yet. He had been in the hallway. Hearing the warrant, he made a desperate, stupid move. He threw something, a small gray canister. It hit the marble floor and exploded in a thick, acrid cloud of smoke. People screamed, diving for cover. The fire alarms blared again. "Finch!" Cassian yelled. I grabbed the bassinet, but Finch was already there, a blur of motion. He snatched the entire carrier and rolled behind the judge's bench, out of the smoke, out of the line of fire. June let out a single, terrified wail. Lev moved like a bull. He didn't draw a gun. He charged through the smoke-filled doorway. I heard a heavy, sickening thud, a grunt, and then the sound of a man's body hitting the floor. No weapons, just as he'd promised. "It's done," Cassian said, his voice at my ear. He grabbed my hand. "Hollis, the waiting room." He pulled me through the judge's private side door, the same one we had fled through the day before, just as security flooded the courtroom. We tumbled into a small, quiet annex, reserved for judges and lawyers. The alarms were muffled here. We were safe. I was breathing hard, my throat raw from the smoke. June's single, sharp cry still echoed in my ears. "Finch has her. She's safe," Cassian said, seeing the look on my face. I nodded, leaning against the wall, my adrenaline crashing. He was standing in front of me, his suit jacket singed at the cuff, his face smudged with soot. He had done it. He had stepped into the light. I didn't think. I reached out and grabbed the lapels of his suit jacket. I pulled him down to me. The kiss was short, hard, and tasted of smoke and adrenaline. It was not a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of profound, desperate gratitude. My hand, shaking, went from his lapel to his neck, my fingers pressing against his pulse. It was hammering, a frantic, vital rhythm under his skin. Alive, alive, alive. He held me, his hands on my waist, grounding me. "Mara," he whispered, his voice raspy. The door opened. We sprang apart. It was Daria. She looked at us, at our proximity, at the soot on Cassian's face, and her expression didn't flicker. "It's done," she said. "The Night Heron is sealed. The news just broke. The Blackfin network is in chaos. They're cut off. And their leadership is in custody. And the FSCB, they're imploding. Washington just recalled the entire regional command. It's a political bloodbath. The storm is here." She was right. Cassian was now the man who had brought down the BHI and the FSCB. He was clean, but he was also the most visible target in the city. "We need to disappear," he said, turning to me. The moment was over. The strategist was back. "Disappear where another warehouse," I said, exhausted. "No," he said. "A normal life. or as close as we can get, at least for a while. Hollis Crane owns a rental property, a small house, in Summit Ridge. It's quiet, suburban, boring, it's in his name. There is no link to me. He was offering me an out, a way to be separate from him. You and June will go there, he continued. You will be Mara Ellison, a freelance artist and a new mother. I will... Step back. The Viero concern is about to be under the most powerful microscope in the country. I cannot have that scrutiny touch you or June. He was building a wall between us for my protection. I looked at this man, who had gone from a voice on the phone to a name on a bracelet, to a shield, to the man I was kissing in a smoky room. I'll go, I said. We'll try it, for 30 days, but I have one condition. He waited. I want you to read to her, every night, a page from a book. I don't care if it's over a secure video link. I don't care if it's a children's story or a shipping manifest. I put my hand on his chest. I want her to remember the voice of her shield. The 30th day at Summit Ridge dawned clear and bright. The air in this quiet, suburban neighborhood smelled like cut grass and warm sunlight, a scent so foreign and peaceful it made my nerves ache. I was in the small backyard of the rental house, setting up a small table. Today was the day. I had the new bracelet, the official one engraved with Juniper Ellison. It was a simple, private naming ceremony, just me and June. For 30 days, we had lived a life of impossible normalcy, and for 30 nights, at 8 p.m. sharp, my laptop would chime, Cassian's face would appear, and he would read. He read Goodnight Moon. He read The Runaway Bunny. One night, he read, in his low, serious monotone, a page from a Port Wexler zoning ordinance, which made me laugh until I cried. He had kept his promise. I had just placed June in her bassinet on the grass when the side gate squeaked. My blood ran cold. It wasn't Cassian. It was Colin Bray. He looked ruined. His charming, ambitious smile was gone, replaced by a desperate, hollow-eyed gauntness. He wore a rumpled suit and held up a laminated ID. Mara, he said, his voice a dry rasp. I have a warrant from the FSCB. There was an error in the bracelet data. I need to take the child just for a quick verification. I didn't move. The old fear, the old panic, it tried to rise, but it found no purchase. You're not FSCB. Colin, you're not anything. Get out of my yard. He let out a sharp, ugly laugh. You still don't get it, do you? Who do you think was the bridge? Mara. Who do you think coordinated Talbot at the BHI with the Blackfin Street crew? Who do you think was feeding the FSCB just enough data to keep them interested? They all thought they were running me, but I was the link. I ran it all. He was confessing. His arrogance, the one thing he had left, was making him stupid. And now, he snarled, I'm cleaning up the last loose end. Give me the kid. The kid is not yours to take. Cassian's voice. He was at the other end of the yard, by the house. He wasn't alone. Hollis Crane stood beside him, holding a briefcase. Daria was behind them, her eyes as cold as a winter morning. Viero, Colin spat, his hand twitching. Hollis, Cassian said, his voice calm. Hollis Crane stepped forward and produced his own document. Mr. Bray, this is a permanent sealed order from the Tri-County Probate Court, signed by Judge Eleanor March this morning. It grants full and sole custody of Juniper Ellison to Miss Ellison. It also includes a permanent restraining order against you. You are in violation of it right now. Colin looked at the paper, at Cassian, at me. He was trapped, his face contorted in panic, and his hand darted into his jacket. He pulled out a small black device, a signal, and he was calling his backup. You're too late, Viero, they're already here, he shrieked, pressing the button. No, I said. They all looked at me. I was shaking, but not with fear, with rage. I stepped away from the bassinet, placing myself between it and Colin. I walked toward him, and I pulled a folded piece of paper from my pocket, the paper I had made Cassian sign in the warehouse. You want to talk about documents? Colin, I said, my voice ringing out in the quiet yard. This is the Mother-Child Protection Clause. I made Mr. Viero signed it. It states that if any harm came to my daughter, he would be legally and financially responsible for her entire life. I took a breath. And you want to know what else was in the decoy bracelet you and Talbot were so desperate to get? The one Daria tracked to the night heron? I held up the new burner phone, and I pressed play. Colin's voice filled the backyard, smooth, arrogant, unmistakable. The container is marked VH. No, the manifest is clean. I'll handle the BHI side. You just make sure your men are at the pier. Payment is 10% of cargo value, as discussed. It was the recording Daria had pulled from the bracelet's transmitter, a recording of Colin's call to Blackfin, negotiating the theft of the decoy container. Colin's face went white. He had just heard his own death sentence. "They're coming," he screamed, looking at the street. "You're all dead." And just as he said it, a white panel van sped down the quiet suburban street and slammed to a stop. The side door flew open and 4 men. The last dregs of Blackfin spilled out, charging up the lawn. Cassian didn't move for his gun, and he didn't look at the men. He turned, grabbed a thick rope hanging by the back door, a rope for a small, decorative wooden church bell, and pulled. A loud, clear, bronze clang echoed through the suburban silence. It was a signal. And all at once, the world erupted. It wasn't a mob war. It was a neighborhood watch. 2 men in Summit Ridge security jackets stepped out from behind the garage, from the house next door, 3 more, and then, from the street, the sound of sirens. Not 1, a dozen, the real police, the Port Wexler Metropolitan Police, arriving in force. Colin's men stopped, utterly confused, caught between private security and city cops. The press, who had clearly been tipped off by Daria and were waiting at the end of the street, flooded the lawn, cameras rolling. In the center of it all, Cassian Viero stood. He looked at the police, at the press, at the neighbors, and he slowly, deliberately, raised both his hands in the air. "My name is Cassian Viero," he announced, his voice carrying over the noise. "I am here, unarmed. I will cooperate with any and all public investigations. My only concern is for the safety of the mother and child. Do not touch the child." It was his final move, a public declaration. He was no longer a shadow. He was a man, surrendering to the light on his own terms. The scene collapsed in on itself. Colin, seeing Lev walking calmly toward him from the gate, made a break for the back fence. He was met by 2 uniformed Port Wexler officers. From behind a hedge, Rex Talbot, who had been orchestrating the van, was pulled out in handcuffs, his face a mask of total defeat. Finch had June. He had lifted the entire bassinet and moved it, silent as a ghost, to my side, placing himself between us and the chaos, a perfect closed loop of protection. A black car pulled up. Judge Eleanor March stepped out, her face furious and resolved. She had been on call, ready for this exact moment. She strode into the center of the yard, holding her permanent order. "By the authority of the Tri-County Court," she boomed. "This scene is under my jurisdiction. Juniper Ellison is a ward of this court, and she is unharmed. Custody is permanently and solely granted to Mara Ellison." She looked at Cassian. "This court further notes the request of the mother and names Cassian Viero as the provisional guardian, to be activated only upon the mother's request or incapacitation. This does not affect the child's name or the mother's rights." It was done, every thread tied. Later, the sirens were gone, the press was gone, Colin and Talbot were gone, the suburban street was quiet again. Daria, Hollis, Lev, and Finch had melted away. It was just me, Cassian, and June. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and bruised purple. I sat on the grass. I took the old blank hospital band off June's ankle. I picked up the new one, the silver one, Juniper Ellison. I fastened it. It was real. Cassian knelt on the grass beside me. He was watching my hands. He touched the old plastic Viero bracelet that I now held, the one that had started it all, the shield. I put it in a small wooden memory box I had bought. "Your name doesn't need to be on her bracelet. "Cassian," I said, my voice thick. He looked at me, his gray eyes soft in the fading light. He touched my cheek. "I know," he whispered. "It just needs to be in her home." I closed the box. I put June, sleeping and safe, into her bassinet. I turned back to him. He stood up, and he held out his hand. I took it. He pulled me to my feet and into his arms. The kiss was not like the one in the smoky room. It was not born of adrenaline or gratitude. It was slow. It was deep. It was a promise. It was the start of a life, not the end of a war. We stood in the backyard, holding on, my hands locked behind his neck, his arms wrapped around my waist. In the distance, the last of the city sirens faded to silence. The storm was over. The air was quiet. Peace was beginning. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, and let's connect. Make sure you subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and like this video. It would also mean the world if you hit that hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.